The entire hospital floor went silent the moment he walked in, but the young nurse had already risked everything, leaning close to whisper the truth to the most dangerous man in the city. "They're giving your mother the wrong medicine, and it isn't a mistake." Now, with his mother's life hanging in the balance, he's about to tear the hospital apart to find out why. Her name is Chloe, a dedicated nurse on the geriatric ward. His name is Vincent Morty, a man whose reputation is built on fear and absolute control. His mother, Sophia, is a patient here, frail and trusting. Chloe has just shattered that trust with a terrifying accusation. This isn't about a simple error. This is about a pattern of deliberate harm hidden within the sterile walls of Mercy General Hospital. Who would target an old woman, and what do they have to gain? To find out, Vincent is about to pull back the curtain on a conspiracy where patients are not just treated, but targeted. For Chloe, nursing was never just a job. It was a calling she felt in her bones, a promise to advocate for those who couldn't speak for themselves. She'd spent 5 years on the geriatric ward of Mercy General, watching families come and go, witnessing the quiet dignity of aging. Sophia Morty was different. Admitted 3 weeks ago for congestive heart failure, she was sharp, kind, and spoke fondly of her son, Vincent, who visited every evening without fail. Her chart showed a standard treatment plan: diuretics, blood pressure medication, careful monitoring. But Sophia wasn't improving, she was fadding. It started with small things the senior nurses dismissed. A dose of lisinopril signed off, but not logged in the automated dispenser. A subtle increase in Sophia's lethargy after her midday meds, contrary to what her vitals should have caused. Chloe began double-checking everything. She reviewed the medication administration records against the physician's orders. On paper, it was perfect. In reality, sitting at Sophia's bedside, Chloe saw a different story. The elderly woman's hands trembled more. Her once clear eyes grew clouded. When Chloe mentioned her concerns to the charge nurse, she was told she was overworked, imagining things. "Elderly patients decline, Chloe. It's what they do." But Chloe knew the statistics. Patients over 70 are twice as likely to die from a medical error. She'd seen the reports. She started keeping her own notes, a separate log hidden in her locker. She watched the flow of personnel on the floor. A particular night shift nurse, Leo, always seemed to be assigned to Sophia. A float nurse from the agency with impeccable credentials but cold, efficient hands. And then, one Tuesday night, Chloe saw it. Leo scanned the barcode on a medication vial, but the soft beep of the scanner was followed by a second, quieter click from his pocket. A click she recognized from her own training modules on diversion, the sound of a single-dose vial being snapped open and replaced. The next morning, Sophia's blood work came back with dangerously elevated potassium levels, a potential side effect of one of her heart medications if the dose was too high. The on-call resident ordered a review. The electronic record showed the correct, safe dose had been administered. Chloe's private notes told a different story. She went to the hospital's internal compliance officer, a former administrator named Gerald. She presented her log, her observations. He listened, nodded, took copies of her notes, and told her he would open a discreet investigation. He warned her not to speak to anyone else. "We handle these things internally to protect the hospital's reputation and, more importantly, to protect you from retaliation." A week passed, Sophia worsened. She was moved to a more isolated room at the end of the hall. Chloe was quietly reassigned to a different wing for 2 shifts. When she returned, Gerald called her into his office. His demeanor had changed. There was no evidence of wrongdoing, he said. Her notes were the anxious scribblings of a nurse under stress. The pharmacy audit was clean. Leo had impeccable references. She was advised to take some personal time, to consider if the emotional toll of geriatric care was too much for her. It was a velvet-gloved threat. This was the retaliation the research warned about, the silencing mechanism built into the system. That night, watching Sophia struggle to breathe through her oxygen mask, something in Chloe broke. The protocol had failed. The system designed to protect was now the weapon. She remembered the family photos by Sophia's bed, the son with the intense eyes who visited like clockwork. She knew who he was. Everyone in the city knew the name Morty. Approaching him was professional suicide. It was crossing a line from which there was no return, but not approaching him, she realized, was a death sentence for Sophia. She waited for his visit. She saw his black town car pull into the dedicated spot. She watched from the nurse's station as he walked down the corridor, a man who moved like he owned the very air he breathed. The staff stiffened, eyes down. This was her moment. As he reached his mother's door, Chloe stepped into his path, her heart hammering against her ribs. Her voice was a tremor, a whisper meant only for him. "Mr. Morty, I need to speak with you. It's about your mother's care." He looked at her through her, his expression unreadable. "Now." She led him to a deserted supply room, the smell of antiseptic thick in the air. She showed him her hidden log, the discrepancies, the timeline of Sophia's decline against the perfect official records. She told him about the scanner click, about Leo, about Gerald's dismissal. The medications she's being given are wrong. They are deliberately wrong. They are making her sicker. I don't know why, but it's not a mistake. Vincent Morty listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't get angry. His face became a mask of cold stone. When she finished, he simply asked, "This nurse Leo, he is here tonight?" Chloe nodded. Vincent pulled out his phone, typed a single sentence and put it away. Then he did something unexpected. He placed a hand on her shoulder. The grip was firm, not threatening, but absolutely anchoring. "You will come with me, you will point him out, you will not speak, you will not leave my side." It wasn't a request. Quiet of the supply room was shattered by the distant, rising wail of hospital alarms. Not the code blue for a patient, but the blaring, rhythmic alarm for a lockdown facility. Someone had triggered a security quarantine. Vincent's phone buzzed. He read the message, and for the first time, a flicker of lethal intent flashed in his eyes. He looked at Chloe. "It seems your Mr. Gerald has decided we shouldn't have this conversation." The door to the supply room handle suddenly jiggled, then stopped. A shadow blocked the narrow window. They were locked in, but they were not alone. The hunt inside the hospital had just begun, and the prey had become the hunters. Vincent didn't wait for the door to open. He moved with a speed that belied his imposing frame, grabbing a metal IV pole from a corner and jamming it under the door handle, bracing it against the floor. The handle jiggled again, more violently. A voice, muffled but authoritative, came from the other side. "Hospital security, open the door." Vincent ignored it. His attention was on the ceiling tiles. He dragged a shelving unit beneath a panel, climbed up, and pushed it aside, revealing the dark cavity above. He reached down for Chloe. "Up, now." She hesitated for only a second before taking his hand, her sneakers scrambling against the shelving as he pulled her into the cramped, dusty space above the ceiling. Below, the door shuddered as someone threw their weight against it. Vincent replaced the tile, plunging them into near darkness, pierced only by thin blades of light from the edges of tiles below. "Crawl. Follow the conduit lines toward the exterior walls," he whispered. The space was a labyrinth of piping, electrical wires, and insulation. They moved on hands and knees, the aluminum frame creaking under their weight. Chloe tried to control her breathing, each inhale tasting of dust and fear. She could hear voices fadding below, then the sound of the supply room door finally giving way. "Clear, they're not here," someone shouted. "Check the cameras, they can't have just vanished." They crawled for what felt like an hour but was likely only minutes, until Vincent stopped at a vent cover. He peered through the slats. Maintenance stairwell, empty. He carefully popped the vent cover free, lowered himself down, then helped Chloe descend. They were in a concrete stairwell, the air cooler, the sounds of the hospital muted. Vincent pulled out his phone again, his fingers flying across the screen. "My men are securing the perimeter. No one leaves until I say so. But first we find your nurse." Chloe's mind was reeling. "Leo, he should be on the 4th floor, West Wing. Room 420 is his last assigned patient." Vincent nodded. "Lead the way, but quietly." They took the stairs up one flight, emerging onto the 4th floor corridor. It was quieter here, the late-night shift in its lull. Chloe pointed to a medication cart parked outside a room halfway down the hall, and there he was. Leo, his back to them, was preparing a syringe, his movements brisk and clinical. Vincent didn't approach like a predator. He walked like he owned the hallway, a direct line that offered no chance for escape. Leo sensed him, turning just as Vincent was upon him. Before the nurse could speak, Vincent had him by the front of his scrubs, pushing him back into the patient's room, an elderly man who was asleep, and closing the door. Chloe slipped in behind them. "Look at me," Vincent said, his voice low and utterly controlled. Leo's eyes were wide, flicking from Vincent to Chloe, understanding dawning. "You know who I am. You know who is in room 314. Explain to me why you are harming my mother." Leo stammered. I don't know what the medication orders are all correct. I just follow the." Vincent's hand moved to the syringe Leo still held. He took it, examined the label. This is insulin. For a diabetic patient, perhaps. This man, he gestured to the sleeping patient, has a chart that says glucose of 105. No diabetes, a mistake, Leo. The nurse paled. Vincent continued, his gaze locking onto Leo's. I am not the police. I am not the hospital board. I am the consequence. You will tell me who gave you the order to adjust Sophia Morty's medication. You will tell me why, or you will learn what happens to people who touch what is mine. The threat hung in the sterile air. Leo broke. It wasn't loyalty that sealed his lips, it was fear of a different kind. It wasn't an order, it was a suggestion, a protocol adjustment. From whom? From compliance, Mr. Gerald. He reviews certain patient charts for cost efficacy. The words were a poison. Chloe felt a chill. Cost efficacy. It was a bland, administrative term, but in a hospital, it had a dark translation. Vincent's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Explain. Leo, sweating now, spoke in a rushed whisper. Mercy General is part of a larger health network, Northeast Health Partners. They have performance metrics, length of stay, resource utilization, patient outcomes for certain high-cost demographic groups. He couldn't look at Chloe. Geriatric patients with multiple chronic conditions, they are the highest cost. If a patient's condition is managed toward a faster resolution, it improves the metrics, improves bonuses for administration. Gerald identifies patients who fit a profile: long-term poor prognosis, high resource use, minimal family oversight. He stopped, the implication clear. Sophia Morty had a poor long-term prognosis. She was a high resource user, and they had assumed, incorrectly, that her son, a busy man with a dangerous reputation, had minimal oversight. My mother is not a metric, Vincent said, the words barely audible. But Chloe's nursing mind was already connecting worse dots. The medication errors, the elevated potassium. It wasn't to kill her outright, that would be too obvious. It was to induce a crisis, renal failure, a rapid, catastrophic decline that would be attributed to her age and existing conditions. A natural progression. She looked at Leo with horror. You were slowly poisoning her to make her die faster, to clear the bed and improve the hospital's statistics. Leo looked at the floor, which was as good as a confession. The systemic failure wasn't an accident. It was a policy, a silent, murderous efficiency drive hidden behind computer algorithms and performance reviews. Vincent released Leo, letting him stumble back against the wall. The nurse gasped for air. Vincent turned to Chloe. Where is Gerald's office? Administration wing, 3rd floor. But Vincent, if what he's saying is true, this isn't just one man. This is the hospital system itself. Then we start with the man and tear the system down after, Vincent replied. He looked back at Leo. You will come with us. You will repeat what you said to Gerald. And you will pray, I decide, you are more useful alive than dead. They moved again, a tense procession through the back stairwells. Vincent's phone buzzed continuously, updates from his men. Security was confused, looking for them in all the wrong places. The lockdown initiated by Gerald was now working in their favor, keeping the corridors clear. They reached the administration wing, a carpeted, quiet world far removed from the clinical smell of the wards. Gerald's office was at the end of a hall, his name on a polished plaque. The door was locked. Vincent didn't bother knocking. He took a step back and kicked the door just beside the handle. The wood around the lock splintered with a sound like a gunshot, and the door flew open. Gerald was at his desk, but he wasn't alone. A man in an expensive, tailored suit stood by the window, turning in surprise. On Gerald's computer screen, financial spreadsheets were displayed. Gerald shot to his feet, his face a mask of shock that quickly morphed into blustering anger. What is the meaning of this? This is a private. His words died when he saw Leo, trembling behind Vincent, and then he saw Vincent's eyes. The man by the window recovered first. He was calm, polished. Mr. Morty, this is a dramatic entrance. I'm Robert Thorne, Chief Financial Officer for Northeast Health Partners. I think there's been a misunderstanding we can discuss. Vincent ignored him, his focus on Gerald. You targeted my mother. You ordered this nurse to harm her, for a bonus, for a graph on a screen. Gerald sputtered. That is a monstrous accusation. This nurse is clearly unstable, and this disgruntled employee, he glared at Chloe, is trying to cover for her own incompetence. Chloe stepped forward, her fear now burned away by a white-hot anger. I have logs. I have times, dates, medication discrepancies. Leo just confessed. You review the high-cost demographic lists. You sign off on protocol adjustments. This is murder by spreadsheet. Thorne, the CFO, held up a placating hand. Please, let's not use hysterical language. Cost-efficacy initiatives and palliative care pathways are complex medical concepts. Sometimes, in very frail patients, aggressive treatment does more harm than good. We guide care toward the most compassionate outcome. Vincent picked up a framed photo from Gerald's desk, a generic picture of a sailboat. He looked at it, then at Thorne. Compassionate. He said the word like it was foreign, then he threw the frame against the wall. The glass shattered. You will show me the list. You will show me every patient you have guided. Thorne's mask of professionalism finally slipped, revealing cold steel beneath. That is proprietary data. And you, Mr. Morty, are trespassing and committing assault. Security will be here any moment, and you will be dealing with the police, not with me. As if on cue, the sound of heavy footsteps and radio chatter echoed in the hallway. The real security, not Gerald's initial locked door play, was arriving. Vincent smiled, a thin, dangerous curve of his lips. He looked at his phone. A message flashed on the screen. He showed it to Thorne. It was a live feed from a camera showing the hospital's main lobby. It was filled with men in dark suits, Vincent's men, standing silently, blocking the exits. Your security is dealing with my security, Vincent said. Now, the list. Thorne stared at the screen, his confidence cracking. The financial model didn't account for this variable, a powerful, relentless outsider who operated outside all systems. Gerald, seeing his protector waiver, broke completely. It's on the server, the S drive, folder labeled Q3 Outcomes Optimization, he babbled. It's just business. The insurance reimbursements, the fixed payments for diagnosis-related groups. If a patient stays too long, the hospital loses money. We were just minimizing losses. It's happening everywhere. The admission hung in the air, more damning than any confession of malice. It was just business. Chloe thought of the statistics, the hundreds of thousands of preventable deaths. This was the engine behind those numbers, not evil mustache-twirling villains, but men in offices making spreadsheets balance, turning human lives into negative columns on a balance sheet. Vincent moved to the computer. He inserted a small device from his pocket into the USB port. Downloading everything, he said, his eyes on the progress bar. Thorne made a move as if to stop him, but a single look from Vincent froze him in place. The footsteps in the hall grew louder, stopping outside the shattered door. A uniformed security guard appeared, weapon drawn, but was immediately flanked by two of Vincent's men, who disarmed him with calm efficiency. The balance of power in the hospital had officially shifted. The download completed, Vincent removed the device. He looked at Gerald, then at Thorne. You are both finished, but before you answer to the law, you will answer to me. He turned to Chloe and Leo. We're going back to my mother's room. You, he pointed to Leo, will administer the correct medication under Chloe's supervision, and then you will both tell the police everything. But as they moved to leave, Thorne, backed into a corner, spoke again, his voice a venomous hiss. You think you've won, Morty? You think this is just one hospital? The algorithm that flagged your mother, it wasn't developed here. It's called the Resource Allocation Nexus. It's licensed to over 200 hospitals in 15 states. It doesn't make decisions. It just makes recommendations. Very persuasive, data-driven recommendations. Your mother was one of thousands. You can't stop a system. He smiled then, a ghastly expression. And the beauty of it is, no one gave an order. The machine just pointed out the statistical inevitability. We just helped nature along. Vincent stopped at the door. He didn't look back at Thorne. He looked at Chloe, seeing the scale of the horror dawning in her eyes. It wasn't a conspiracy of people. It was a conspiracy of numbers, automated and scaled, making murder mathematically efficient. Thorne had just handed them the true enemy, and it was a ghost in the machine, replicated in hospitals across the country. Saving Sophia was just the beginning. The war for the soul of healthcare had just been declared, and the battlefield was everywhere. The algorithm was called the Resource Allocation Nexus. And as Thorne's words hung in the broken office, the scope of the horror became a tidal wave. This wasn't just one hospital or one administrator. It was a system, perfected and sold, making murder a matter of administrative efficiency. Vincent's men secured Gerald and Thorne. The local police, now swarming the hospital's perimeter, were confused by the standoff between hospital security and Vincent's organized, silent guards. But Vincent had no time for jurisdictional disputes. His immediate world had shrunk to a single room on the third floor. With Leo in tow, under the watchful eye of one of Vincent's men, they returned to Sophia's room. Chloe immediately took charge of Sophia's care, her professional hands moving with urgent tenderness. She checked vitals, reviewed the IV lines, and with Leo's terrified assistance, administered the correct, life-sustaining medications from a newly verified stock. The change was not immediate, but the terrifying rasp in Sophia's breathing began to ease within minutes. Vincent stood by his mother's bed, holding her frail hand, his formidable presence reduced to that of a worried son. For the first time, Chloe saw the man beneath the legend, and it was far more terrifying than the myth. But the world outside the room was fracturing. News vans, drawn by the police presence and lockdown, were setting up outside. Vincent's lawyer, a sharp woman named Elena, arrived and began navigating the legal maze, ensuring Vincent's actions were framed as a citizen's arrest and protective intervention. The evidence from Gerald's computer, the Q3 Outcomes Optimization folder, was a time bomb. It contained not just lists, but emails, bonus structures, and performance reviews explicitly tying financial incentives to patient mortality rates in high-cost cohorts. It was a prosecutor's dream and a hospital network's nightmare. Chloe, however, was trapped in a different kind of nightmare. Thorne's revelation about the algorithm's widespread use haunted her. She borrowed a computer at the nurse's station and, with a password provided by a now cooperative Leo, accessed the hospital's intranet. She searched for the Resource Allocation Nexus portal. It existed, a sleek, bland dashboard with green, yellow, and red patient indicators. She typed in her own credentials. Access denied. Tried a generic search for clinical decision support tools, and there it was, buried in a list. RAN Clinical Advisory Module. The description was benign, a predictive analytics tool to optimize patient flow and resource utilization. She clicked a link to the vendor, Health Metrics Solutions, a subsidiary of Ethelred Holdings. The corporate language was impenetrable, but the client list was not. She recognized dozens of hospital names across the state, hundreds nationally. She printed the client list, her hands shaking. This was the map of the contagion. She brought it to Vincent, who was now on the phone, his voice a low, controlled storm. He saw the list and ended his call. "We have the evidence for here. But this," he tapped the paper, "is a hydra. Cut off one head, two more grow." Chloe nodded. "We have to get this to someone who can act on a national level. The Justice Department, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the news." Vincent's lawyer, Elena, interjected. "If we go public now, we risk contaminating the criminal case here. Northeast Health Partners will go into immediate lockdown. They'll shred everything we haven't captured." Vincent looked at his sleeping mother. "Then we capture everything, tonight." What followed was a digital heist orchestrated from a hospital room. Vincent had resources beyond muscle. He made a call to a man he simply referred to as the archivist. Within an hour, a team of forensic data analysts, operating remotely, began penetrating the firewalls of Northeast Health Partners. Their goal, to extract the entire RAN database, every patient flagged, every recommendation made, every financial transaction tied to outcomes. It was a race against time. As news of the scandal began to leak from the hospital, the corporate defenses would harden. While the digital siege unfolded, the human cost demanded attention. Chloe, armed with the patient list from Gerald's office, did the unthinkable. She began calling the families of other patients currently flagged in the system at Mercy General. There was Mrs. Gable in 408, a sweet widow with advanced emphysema. Her son, a truck driver, was shocked when Chloe explained his mother's palliative pathway was initiated not by a doctor's compassionate recommendation, but by an algorithm calculating her as a net loss. There was Mr. Chen in 512, a stroke victim whose aggressive treatment had been quietly downgraded in the system, delaying crucial therapy. One by one, families descended on the hospital, their confusion turning to fury. The floor, once a place of quiet suffering, became a scene of raw, human outrage. This public unraveling was the trigger for the countermove. At 2 a.m., as Vincent's data team reported they were 80% through the extraction, every screen in the hospital, patient monitors, nurses' stations, administrative terminals flickered and went black. A moment later, they rebooted to a single stark message: SYSDMWID failure. Contact IT support. Thorne, from his guarded holding room in a nearby office, smirked. Remote kill switch. Part of the service contract, you're too late. But Vincent's archivist was better. The team had anticipated a wipe. They hadn't just been downloading data, they'd been mirroring it in real time to encrypted servers. The kill switch severed the live connection, but the copy was already 95% complete. More importantly, the attempted wipe was itself a piece of evidence, proof of conscious guilt and destruction of evidence. The fallout was now irreversible. The local district attorney, a career politician named Owens, arrived on scene, flanked by federal agents from the Department of Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General. The scale had tipped beyond local corruption. This was Medicare fraud on an industrial scale, potentially billions in fraudulent claims bundled with wrongful death. The feds took charge, sequestering Gerald, Thorne, and Leo for questioning. They also wanted Chloe and Vincent. In a small conference room turned interrogation room, Chloe told her story to a stone-faced HHS agent named Greer. She presented her handwritten logs, her timeline, her analysis of Sophia's decline. She was no longer a disgruntled employee, she was the primary whistleblower. Agent Greer listened, then dropped the hammer. Nurse Porter, do you understand that by coming forward, you have likely ended your career in healthcare? The retaliation won't be overt, it will be silent. No hospital will hire you, you will be blacklisted as a troublemaker. Chloe didn't blink. If the system is so broken that telling the truth ends your career, then it's not a career worth having. Vincent's interview was different. They met in the hospital chapel of all places. Agent Greer was direct. Mr. Morty, your methods are unconventional, but you've exposed a cancer. We need your cooperation, not your interference. The data your people captured, we need it, all of it. Vincent handed over a small, encrypted hard drive. It's all there, the algorithm, the client list, the financials, but I have a condition. Greer raised an eyebrow. My mother receives immediate, independent, top-tier care paid for by the government as a witness, and the nurse, Chloe Porter, receives full federal whistleblower protection, including relocation and a new identity if she wants it. Greer nodded slowly. That can be arranged, but there's something else. This algorithm, RAN, it doesn't just make recommendations. We've suspected for years that these clinical advisory tools were being gamed to maximize profit, but this is the first time we've gotten inside the engine. The developer, Health Metrics Solutions, their parent company, Ethelred Holdings, is a major political donor. They have friends in very high places. This fight won't be in a courtroom, it will be in the halls of Congress and on cable news. As dawn broke, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges, a temporary stalemate settled over Mercy General. The guilty were in custody, the evidence was secured. Sophia Morty was stable, being prepared for transfer to a specialized cardiac unit at a rival hospital. But Chloe stood at a window, looking down at the media circus below, holding the printout of the RAN client list. 200 hospitals, hundreds of thousands of patients. The algorithm was still out there, quietly crunching numbers, marking lives as unprofitable. Turning off one server in one corporate office wouldn't stop it. The real enemy was an idea that a human life could have a negative value. Vincent joined her, his coat over his arm. My mother is safe because of you, he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. But you were right. This is bigger than one woman. What you started here, it's a war. Chloe looked at the list, then at the rising sun. Then we have to fight it, not with threats, but with this. She held up the paper. With the truth. We have to make every family in every one of these hospitals ask the same question. Is Grandma dying or is she being helped along? Vincent followed her gaze. How? The news cycle will last a week. The lobbyists will bury it in committees. Chloe turned to him, a fierce, exhausted light in her eyes. Then we don't give them a week. We give them a movement. We take the story to the people it actually affects. We go to the next hospital on the list and the next, and we help them ask that question. She was proposing a crusade, walking directly into the heart of the machine that wanted her silenced. Vincent studied her for a long moment, then gave a slow, approving nod. The Mafia boss and the nurse had stopped one plot. Now, they were about to declare war on the system that created it. The quiet of the morning was the calm before a national storm. The movement didn't have a name at first. It was just a series of urgent conversations in hospital waiting rooms and church basements, facilitated by an unlikely duo, a former mob enforcer and a blacklisted nurse. Chloe Porter, under federal protection, became the public face. She appeared on a primetime news special, not as an expert, but as a storyteller. She held up the list of 200 hospitals and told the story of Sophia Morty, of the click of a replaced vial, of the term cost-efficacy. She didn't shout. She simply asked, "How many of our grandparents are on a list like this right now?" The segment went viral. The network's tip line melted down. Vincent Morty operated in the shadows, funding the effort with resources that were never fully traced. He hired a team of forensic accountants and private investigators. Their mission: to use the stolen RAN data as a master key. They cross-referenced the algorithms, high-cost patient flags, with publicly available mortality rates at the affiliated hospitals. The pattern was undeniable. Hospitals using the RAN system had a 15% higher mortality rate for patients over 75 within 30 days of admission, compared to demographically similar hospitals that did not. It was a statistical ghost, now given form. The first major break came from a whistleblower inside Health Metrics Solutions, the algorithm's developer, emailed anonymously to Chloe's newly created advocacy group, The Silent Floor. It was a trove of internal memos. The memos revealed that the algorithm's original programming was even more aggressive, but beta tests showed it induced unacceptable levels of family inquiry. So they dialed it back, creating a soft suggestion model that was harder to trace. The whistleblower's note ended with, "I helped build this, I need it to stop." Armed with this, Federal Agent Greer and the HHS Office of Inspector General moved from a single prosecution to a sweeping national investigation. Subpoenas flew. Grand juries were convened in 3 states. The CEO of Ethelred Holdings was called to testify before Congress. He called the RAN system a decision support tool and blamed rogue administrators for misinterpreting its outputs. It was the expected defense. But then a senator from Vermont, whose own mother had died in a hospital using the system, produced a document from the internal memos. It was a line from a programmer's note: optimization target, reduce average length of stay for DRG 297 by 22%, irrespective of complication flags. DRG 297 was the Medicare code for heart failure. The room fell silent. The algorithm wasn't making suggestions, it was setting quotas. The legal dominoes began to fall. Northeast Health Partners settled a massive civil suit for $2.3 billion, the largest Medicare fraud settlement in history. Gerald, Thorne, and Leo pleaded guilty to conspiracy, fraud, and involuntary manslaughter in exchange for testifying against the higher-ups at Health Metrics. They would spend decades in prison. But the true victory was not in the courtroom, it was in the hospital wards. One by one, the hospitals on the list began publicly discontinuing their use of the RAN system. Boards of directors, terrified of liability and public shame, ordered independent audits of patient care protocols. The phrase, cost-efficacy, was scrubbed from internal documents. For Chloe, the victory was bittersweet. She was hailed as a hero by patient advocacy groups and received a commendation from the Surgeon General. But as Agent Greer predicted, she was unemployable in traditional healthcare. No hospital would touch her, so she built her own path. Using part of the whistleblower reward money from the federal settlement, she founded the Bedside Trust Initiative, a nonprofit that trained families and patient advocates to read hospital charts, understand medication records, and ask the right questions. She became a consultant, helping hospitals rebuild broken safety cultures. She turned her Excel into expertise. Vincent's world transformed in a different way. The death of his father had pushed him into a life of crime, a world of control through fear. Saving his mother pulled him out of it. He used his remaining legitimate businesses to fund free health clinics in the city's poorest neighborhoods, clinics that explicitly forbade any algorithmic patient management. He was rarely photographed, but when he was, it was leaving a church or visiting a clinic. His mother, Sophia, recovered and vibrant on his arm. The old rumors never died, but they were overshadowed by a new narrative: redemption. The DA dropped several pending investigations, citing his extraordinary cooperation in the healthcare case. It was an unspoken deal, a clean slate for a crusader. 5 years after the whisper in the hallway of Mercy General, Chloe stood at a podium at a national patient safety conference. The room was packed. She was about to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award. She looked out at the crowd of doctors, nurses, and administrators. We beat one algorithm, she said, but the mindset that created it is a virus. It mutates. Now the talk is about AI diagnostics, predictive readmission models, automated discharge planning. The tools are getting smarter, and the sales pitches are getting smoother. Our vigilance cannot end, because the question is no longer just, are they giving the wrong medicine? The new question is, who programmed the doctor? After her speech, a young nurse approached her, eyes wide with admiration. "I read about you in nursing school," she said. "You're the reason I specialized in geriatric ethics." Chloe felt a lump in her throat. This was the legacy, not the awards, but the next generation of guardians. Later that evening, at a quiet dinner with Vincent and his mother, Sophia placed a gentle hand on Chloe's. "You gave me back my life," the old woman said, "but you also gave my son back his soul." Vincent, usually stoic, looked away, emotion raw on his face. The story seemed complete. Justice served, systems changed, lives redeemed. But there was one final, unsettling piece of data that emerged from the national audit. It was buried in an appendix of the congressional report, noticed only by a few dedicated analysts. The RAN algorithm had one more hidden feature. In hospitals where it was installed, it didn't just flag high-cost elderly patients. It also flagged another, seemingly random demographic: uninsured patients between the ages of 20 and 40 who presented with traumatic injuries, particularly from violent crime or car accidents. For these patients, the algorithm didn't recommend reducing care. It did the opposite. It recommended the most aggressive, most expensive, most resource-intensive treatments available. The mortality rate for this group was actually lower than the national average. But the cost to the hospital was astronomically higher, and because these patients were uninsured, the costs were written off as charity care, generating massive tax breaks for the hospital systems. The algorithm wasn't just weeding out the unprofitable, it was also identifying the profitably tragic victims whose misfortunes could be mined for financial gain through a different accounting trick. The system wasn't just killing to save money, it was also spending extravagantly to make money, all while appearing heroic. The perversion was complete. The machine had learned to play both sides. Chloe received the data packet from an anonymous researcher. She sat at her desk, the weight of this new revelation pressing down on her. She thought the fight was over. She was wrong. It had just evolved into a more complex, more sinister form. She picked up the phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. Vincent answered on the first ring. "Chloe," she took a deep breath. "We need to talk. It's not over." They found another list. There was a long pause on the other end, then the sound of a chair scraping back. "I'll be right there," Vincent said. The war for the soul of healthcare had entered its next, even darker chapter. But this time, the whistleblower and the reformed kingpin were ready. They had learned that the system was not just broken, it was brilliantly, maliciously adaptive. And so would they have to be. The silent floor was now a rallying cry, and the battle lines were drawn in the very code that managed human life. So what is the true cost of care? This story began with a whisper, a single act of courage in a sterile hallway. It revealed a hidden world where human life was reduced to a data point, where compassion was measured in profit margins. Chloe and Vincent tore that world open, but as the final, chilling revelation showed, the problem doesn't disappear, it evolves. The algorithms get smarter. The justifications become more sophisticated. The battle shifts from overt harm to insidious optimization. The story of Mercy General is a microcosm of a much larger silent epidemic. The statistics we explored at the beginning, the hundreds of thousands of preventable deaths, are not just numbers. They are Sophia's. They are mothers, fathers, grandparents, whose stories were cut short by a system that forgot its purpose. Chloe Porter's journey from a dedicated nurse to a national advocate proves that one voice, armed with truth and relentless conviction, can force that system to look in the mirror. Vincent Morty's path from feared enforcer to unlikely reformer shows that redemption is found not in power, but in protection. But the fight is never truly over. The final report's appendix, detailing how the same algorithm exploited the tragedies of the uninsured for financial gain, tells us the core sickness remains. It is a sickness that views healthcare not as a human right, but as a financial instrument. The question left for all of us is this: in an age of artificial intelligence and big data, who guards the guardians? Who programs the programmers? The answer cannot be another algorithm. It must be us. It must be informed families asking questions at the bedside. It must be whistleblowers, supported and protected. It must be a culture that values the person in the bed over the number on the spreadsheet. Chloe and Vincent continue their work, their partnership a testament to the idea that change often comes from the most unexpected alliances. They remind us that sometimes, to save a life, you have to be willing to break the rules of a broken game. Their story is a warning and a call to action. The next time you or someone you love enters a hospital, listen. Look beyond the beeping monitors and the clinical smiles. Ask to see the chart. Understand the plan. Be the advocate. Because in the quiet space, between a diagnosis and a treatment, between a scan and a surgery, that is where humanity is either honored or erased. This has been the story of the silent floor. If you found it compelling, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next deep dive into the hidden systems that shape our world. Drop a comment below and let me know what you thought. Until next time, stay curious and never stop asking questions.